All right, welcome in. 49ers assistant coaches spoke today. That means that we have some deep intel into the team. This happens during OTAs. We get a look at a practice or two, and then the assistant coaches speak to the media. So you get to know the new coaches, but you also get to know how the 49ers are working, especially toward the back half of that roster, which sometimes I feel is the most interesting stuff because obviously Brock Purdy came from the back half of the roster a couple years ago. So today was a fact-finding day on the 49ers. And I'm going to start with tight ends coach Brian Fleury talking about Mason Pline, 49ers undrafted rookie tight end, basketball player formerly at Furman before he transferred to Ferris State. And there he played some football. So he's new to the game of football, especially at a higher level, played at that FCS level starting in 2021. Listen to Brian Fleury, the 49ers tight ends coach, talk about Mason Pline's toughness. Play I saw in Pline's tape, he caught a pass over the middle, got lit up, but he held on to it. And to me, I mean, a guy that had only played basketball, that didn't seem like something you just learn. It's something that you just have, right?
100%. And there's other basketball players we've evaluated that I haven't been as excited about, but we were always looking for signs of a certain level of toughness and like physicality, tolerance that is there, and he definitely had that. We were able to see that, so it makes you more excited to work with the rest of it.
You see Brian Fleury's face light up when I talked about the highlight tape for Mason Pline. I showed that highlight tape to you guys before. I think it was the second or the third play. He's crossing the middle, makes a catch, and just gets pummeled, destroyed, but he doesn't drop the football and he pops right back up. And you could tell by the way that Brian Fleury's face lit up when I'm talking about that tape. He knew exactly what I was talking about. And then he offered that the 49ers have scouted basketball players for that tight end position before. They're looking for that pairing with George Kittle. And I don't think that they've been able to find the requisite toughness from basketball players before to be able to translate onto the football field. But they believe that Mason Pline has all of the physical tools necessary to succeed as a tight end in their system at the NFL level. And the fact that he has the ability to absorb contact, pop right back up, that he has that toughness, that he has that innate sturdiness on a football field to be able to withstand contact. I think that puts him into a good position to develop as the number 2 receiving threat at tight end that the 49ers need. So look out for Mason Pline. Brian Fleury, obviously very excited about him. Fleury, by the way, is a former college quarterback at Towson. He schemes a lot of the 49ers run game now, but what he does with the tight end position is not only the designing of the run blocking. He looks at the depth of the routes, the precision of the routes, and makes sure that they are perfectly complementary to what the quarterback is doing. So I don't think that people realize how much intricacy goes into designing an NFL offense. But for the 49ers, they're obviously working those intermediate routes. They're working the short game a lot. They attacked deep quite a bit last year as well. But the intermediate and the short game especially is precision dependent. If a tight end takes one false step, or if he's a half second late out of a break, even on a short route, that can really mess up a quarterback because the quarterback is counting on that tight end to be at a certain position on the football field. So Brian Fleury bringing his former QB background to a receiving position, to the tight end position, I think has really helped the 49ers with the flow of the pass game going to that area. And I think George Kittle's had 2 of his best seasons receiving, especially in terms of receiving touchdowns over the time that Brian Fleury has been the 49ers tight ends coach. So it's fascinating stuff. And now Brian Fleury is going to have a chance to work with Mason Pline. On the other side of the tight end quarterback connection is Brock Purdy, the QB himself. And 49ers quarterbacks coach Brian Griese discussed what Brock Purdy can continue to improve on.
So, like I mentioned last year when we had this conversation, I think we can continue to get better at our progressions, footwork, how we manage games, situational awareness, the things that all quarterbacks have to continue to get better at. There were a number of things that come up that young quarterbacks have to be aware of as games go on. You know, when you get to to the red zone fringe and maintaining field goal position and decisions that are made in those areas where you want to make a big play, but the smart play might be to check it down so you get us in field goal range. Things like that. That's what we talk about, situational awareness, on top of all the progressions. And then, growing as a leader, off the field, in the locker room, and what that entails and what that looks like. And as you gain more experience and status on the team and the league, within the organization, what opportunities that presents for you to take a little bit bigger voice, and setting accountability and expectations. So those are some of the things we talked about.
Have you seen that from him? We noticed he's a little more talkative at the podium with us. Has he been more in meetings or in the locker room? Have you noticed that just at the end of last season, maybe?
I think it's just a confidence thing. I mean, when you first come here, it's a lot. I think of what Tanner Mordecai is going through now. It's you're swimming mentally, and it's hard to be assertive and demonstrative, and be a leader when you're thinking a whole lot and about your job. So definitely, I've seen Brock grow in those areas, and he needs to continue to.
So that is Brian Griese on the growth that Brock Purdy needs to continue to make. I don't think that Brian Griese likes to talk about technical details of how he coaches Brock Purdy and the 49ers quarterbacks all too much, probably for competitive advantage or disadvantage reasons. Today, one thing I brought up to Griese, I was hoping to get a little bit more technical insight on Brock Purdy's improvement rolling to the left. I talk about the weakness coming out of the 2022 tape was that Brock Purdy, whenever defenses would force him to flush to the left, he would flush to the left and he would be inefficient. He uncorked some passes that had no chance of being complete, or even worse, had a good chance of being intercepted in that 2022 season. Then he turned around in 2023 from week 1 against the Steelers when I think it was either Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk that he hit on an off-schedule play rolling to his left. Brock Purdy was sensational. And I think that he avoided unnecessary rollouts to the left by learning how to step up in the pocket. Anyway, anytime that we asked Brian Griese about some of those specifics technically, if the 49ers worked on that between 2022 and 2023, he gives relatively short answers, which are more like non-answers. Today I asked about the roll left and if the 49ers worked on that, and I got a one-word answer, just no. So obviously, Griese doesn't want to delve into the technical stuff. But to me, what's really interesting is that he is more than happy to delve into the leadership aspect of how Brock Purdy is developing. And I think that's really, really important to the 49ers. I mean, they're expecting to pay this guy huge money. We're talking over $50 million a year for sure if he continues his rate of play in 2025, and maybe even $60 million plus per year for Brock Purdy. So when you are gearing up to make that big of an investment in any player, and in this case, a quarterback, you want to make sure that this guy is giving you your money's worth in all facets of his performance. And that's not just on-field performance. That's not just cerebral performance. That is, how does he command both the huddle and the locker room? And we've noticed that Brock Purdy has gotten more confident up on the podium, talking to the media. Through anecdotes from his teammates, we know that he grabbed control of the huddle right away when he told George Kittle to shut up against Tampa Bay in 2022, and people just started cracking up. But we know that he's had a good huddle presence, but I think that his locker room presence is growing more pronounced. And what Brian Griese was talking about there was that once you become more and more acclimated with an NFL playbook, once you're not swimming like the 49ers rookie QB Tanner Mordecai is right now in new information, you develop the confidence to project more leadership. And I think that's where Brock Purdy's at right now. Now, that's why him participating in OTAs this year is a significant step forward. He didn't get a chance to participate in OTAs as an established quarterback in 2022. He'd just been drafted. He was down the depth chart. 2023, he was obviously rehabbing from the elbow surgery. Purdy is now established. He knows the playbook. He's on the level of refinement. And you heard Brian Griese talking about that, talking about situational football, minute details, knowing what the down and distance is, going for the field goal on a shorter throw when it's 3rd and long, as opposed to trying to go for the money ball each time. So Brock Purdy is now working on those situational details. He's working on, the finely tuned details of playing quarterback at a very high position. So that means that he has the major stuff under his belt. That means that he can focus more on projecting that confidence of being a leader. And the 49ers need all of the above from him if they're planning to pay him $50 million plus next season. So I thought that was really interesting insight from 49ers quarterback coach Brian Griese. I thought that the headlining event today was the first interview with the 49ers for Brandon Staley, the former Los Angeles Chargers head coach, who is now an assistant head coach for the 49ers, working primarily with the defense. And as we know, Brandon Staley has that star position that he didn't invent, but he likes to use it, and he's developed his own wrinkles. It's an adaptable position that he's used at stops before when designing a defense. So I made sure to ask Brandon Staley about the star position, and if he thinks the 49ers have versatile enough pieces on the defensive side of the ball to run some of the stuff that he has liked running in the past.
The things that people talk about when referring to your defenses is the adaptability on the back end. Somebody like Jalen Ramsey in 2020, and then what you did with Derwin James. With this group of DBs, do you see, and the draftees too, somebody like Malik Mustapha, who obviously played a lot of positions in that Panther package in college, do you see that type of adaptability on this roster to be able to implement some of the stuff that you like?
Yeah, I think John and his group, John Kyle, this group have put together a really deep football team. And I think in the secondary, particularly, we've got a lot of guys who can play corner, a lot of guys who can play inside. Our safeties have flexibility, and I think that's what allows you to have flexibility is the personnel that do it. So, and our linebackers can all do different jobs too. And, I think some of the acquisitions that we made on the defensive line, both on the edge and inside, that multiplies your ability to be able to do that. So I think, how that, expresses itself is going to, happen in time, this springtime and during training camp, and ultimately, you're trying to put that best product on the field, game one, and then build for a long season. So, but I think we have the pieces to do some nice things.
So, I thought that the main point there, and it should not be forgotten because I think a lot of people will gloss over it, but Brandon Staley at the end emphasized that the 49ers talent will dictate what they run. They're not going to just run a star position like the 2020 Rams did with Jalen Ramsey, who was playing outside and inside just because it sounds good. They're not going to move defensive backs around like Derwin James was moved around by Brandon Staley with the Chargers just because it sounds advanced. You have to have the talent and the skill set with your individual players to be able to implement the stuff that Brandon Staley has implemented in the past. And that's why I asked what I did. I wanted to see if he thought that the 49ers had players with the necessary skill sets to run some of this adaptable, creative stuff on the back end. And I thought that answer was very positive. I mean, I purposefully expanded the scope of the question beyond just defensive backs because somebody like Malik Mustapha, the 49ers rookie safety out of Wake Forest, he played some linebacker, right? I mean, he's built like a linebacker. He's played some nickelback. He's played a position in college called the Panther position, which was normally a third down position, which was all over the formation. So here you have a safety who's built like a mini linebacker, who's even lined up occasionally along the defensive line as part of this Panther position. I mean, this is fascinating stuff. And given the fact that Brandon Staley was dealing with Jalen Ramsey back in 2020 and Ramsey was playing inside and outside, and then Derwin James was playing absolutely everywhere for the Chargers, I think that it's really worth monitoring what kind of stuff the 49ers cook up on the back end with their defense this year. And Staley's answer wasn't just limited to Malik Mustapha, wasn't just limited to Deommodore Lenoir, who I think the 49ers look at as an inside-out player, Renardo Green, somebody who's going to train inside first before moving outside. It wasn't just limited to those guys. He started talking about the linebackers and the defensive linemen too in his answer. And the D lineman, that's really interesting because we've already seen that from Chris Kacerek, who is the 49ers defensive line coach. He talked about the inside-out vision for Yetur Gross-Matos, free agent pickup along the defensive line. Let's listen to see what Chris Kacerek had to say about Gross-Matos and his adaptability, because I think this ties right in with what Brandon Staley expanded all the way to the defensive line when it comes to positional versatility.
Matos, do you see him as somebody who'd be capable of that kind of adaptable role that you've had with Arden Key? Different guys that have played outside and been able to move inside on some of those passing downs?
Yeah, to be honest with you, it's one of the one of the characteristics that really drew us to Etor. Was just the versatility. We've kind of had that through the years with, like you said, Arden and Charles and Menahue and just the different body types. We felt like we wanted to add a dude that could legitimately do both at a high level, play outside at a high level, and then, when needed, schematically be able to bump him down inside and utilize his quickness and his ability to get on fast edges on guards and beat guards, similar to what Arden did. But you first got to be able to play outside, before you can do any of that. And, just the way his length and, he's got 275 pounds behind that length, really good edge setter in the run game outside. Just the speed to power that he can generate from the outside jumped off the tape. And then, when Carolina last year moved him in over guards, you really saw his pass rush come alive as far as, working edges with finesse and technical hand use. So really excited about Etor, another guy that at Penn State we really liked coming out with the skill set, the length, the speed, the hand use, the technicality that he plays with. Very diligent person.
So Yetur Gross-Matos, you heard Chris Kocurek talking about it there, rushing against guards last year. Once they kicked him inside on those passing downs, his athleticism really, really stood out. And that's something that the 49ers with Kocurek have done successfully in the past. And I think when you talk about Brandon Staley philosophically being on the same page with the rest of this 49ers defensive staff, the adaptability has to happen at all levels. It can't just happen in the defensive backfield. It can't just happen at the linebacker position. It has to also happen up front, and then the rush and the coverage have to be tied together. So that's why I showed those clips back to back. Staley talking about adaptability. He thinks that the 49ers have it with many of their players, but he also went all the way down the line and said, I think the defensive linemen have it too. They want to make this an amoebic defense, like an amoeba. They want to make it something that you can't really diagnose pre-snap if you're an offense. Different guys can rush the passer. Different guys can drop back into coverage. You can run multiple different fronts potentially, because I think Brandon Staley is going to diversify some of the looks that the 49ers can bring. It's about evolving a defense that was already very good, but obviously dropped off last season under Steve Wilkes to about number 12 in EPA per play. So we have to look at it all holistically. And that's why the next check-in is going to be with the 49ers DB coach, Daniel Bullocks, who talked about Malik Mustapha's work ethic. So remember, Mustapha, that's somebody I framed the question to Brandon Staley about Mustapha because he's that ball of muscle that can play all over the field. He's a rookie out of Wake Forest that the 49ers recently drafted. Well, listen to what Daniel Bullocks has to say about Mustapha getting into the office early.
Violent. The thing is, he's very smart. Like, he has a strong work ethic. I definitely can say that. Like, sometimes, like, he beat me to my office, like, already as a rookie. Like, and I'm like, dude, what are you still doing? What are you doing here? And we walking at the same time. So it says a lot about who he is. He's a very smart player. When I look at him, I know he's built. I wish I had a body like he did, especially up top. But when you're looking at him, like, he's a guy that got good feet and good hips. He's a very fluid athlete. You wouldn't think that for a guy that's that stout, 5'9", 208, have fluid hips, but he got fluid hips, he got good feet, very smart, he's versatile. Does a lot of things on the back end. When you watch the tape, he can come down in the box, he can bang, he can blitz. He's one of the best tackler guys, best tackling DBs in the draft, which that what we prefer as defense. You want guys that can tackle, because when I tell guys, like, what's your number one stat? Your number one stat is going to be tackles. Like, you're going to be making more tackles than anything else, so you need a guy that can tackle and have the right mindset and the mentality. And on top of that, just his versatility. We need versatile DBs, the guys that can come down on the slot. Guys can play deep, can play cover two, can play high, can play in the post, and that's something that he done at Wake Forest, but not a lot of it, but he did put it on tape. So I'm excited about him. He's getting better each and every day, every time he step on the field.
So Daniel Bullocks emphasized Malik Mustapha's tackling ability. He obviously talked about the versatility. That's what I've been hammering home. But the tackling ability is something that really jumps off the tape for Malik Mustapha. On top of that, and it's very related, is his blitzing ability. And Brandon Staley, he's talking about he's run a lot of three-man fronts before. The 49ers obviously run a four-man front. But in his answer about 3 versus 4-man fronts, Brandon Staley talked about the fact that he's got a lot of players who are good at rushing the passer. And this ties directly into Malik Mustapha's tackling ability and his blitzing ability at Wake Forest. Have a listen to this from Brandon Staley.
Talked about bringing in an outside coach, maybe with some different philosophies and melding it in. He's gone back to the example of his dad.
I mean, I think that this group, it has, it's known for its four-man pass rush, but, it has a lot of guys who can rush, and I think that's the key of really good rush groups is that you have the threat of a lot of people, rushing the passer, and which is what we have here. So, and that's why they've rushed the passer at such a high level long before I got here. So, we have a good group of front guys, and that's what you want to be able to do in this league, regardless of what you play, what system you run, what coverages you play. If you can rush the passer with four guys, then you're feeling pretty good about your chances. And then when you rush more than that, you're doing it because you want to, not because you have to.
So there you have it. 49ers rushing from multiple levels. I really, really do think that we'll see very interesting wrinkles from this defense, because not only does Brandon Staley have that reputation of adding some innovative, interesting wrinkles, and obviously Nick Sorensen the defensive coordinator, comes from an entirely different school of thought with the Seattle-style defense, so you can meld the Seattle-style defense with a Fangio defense. I think that the 49ers have set themselves up for that kind of creativity, but you can only set yourself up so far with the brain trust. Then you have to have players who can actually execute these more radical visions. And that's one thing that I really believe the 49ers have set themselves up with. That's why I talk about Malik Mustapha. That's why I talk about Yetur Gross-Matos. They've had a very targeted process of picking up players, right? Either through free agency or through the draft. They've wanted players with very specific skill sets, versatile defensive linemen. Somebody like Leonard Floyd is a great example. We should talk more about him. That's Brandon Staley's favorite player. Coached him back with the Bears and with the Rams. Leonard Floyd has 39.5 sacks over the past 4 years. He's a long, rangy, athletic player. It's been a lot of two-point stance stuff, though, for Leonard Floyd. Last year was about 50-50 with the three-point stance. He started getting down with his hand in the dirt over in Buffalo. But Floyd, a lot of people say, oh, this is a cleanup sack kind of guy. And they act like that's a bad thing. And then you look at the 49ers and look at the fact that they've got Nick Bosa and Javon Hargrave on the defensive line. Those are two guys that consistently win their one-on-one matchups and even their one-on-two matchups. The one thing that the 49ers need badly, because they're winning on two of the spots along the defensive line with such great consistency, they've badly needed a rangy cleanup guy. Somebody's got eyes in the back of his head. Somebody's got his head on a swivel that's able to corral quarterbacks trying to escape from the pocket. Because Bosa and Hargrave consistently compromise the pocket, you need somebody to be able to actually corral the quarterback. That's something that the 49ers were missing last year. So Leonard Floyd, yeah, he gets a lot of cleanup sacks. But yes, that's a valuable skill. And that's a skill that the 49ers precisely needed along this defensive line. So when you talk about targeted additions for the defense, I think Leonard Floyd very, very much embodies what the 49ers have needed on that defensive line. Chris Kasarik talked about Brandon Staley's favorite player, Leonard Floyd. Let's have a listen into Chris Kasarik on Floyd and that skill set that he's going to bring the 49ers defensive line.
Brandon Staley just said that Leonard's one of his favorite all-time players. He coached him, obviously, I think back in Chicago and then with the Rams as well. Have you talked to Brandon about, Floyd's skill set and, just finding ways to maximize what he can do within the course of this defense?
Yeah, obviously, when we got our list for free agents, and there's 30-something names on the list, and Leonard was one of them, and I knew that Brandon had worked with him, so we connected on it, and then just hearing the conviction, on Brandon's side of it, of the player, the person, the love for the game, and then the skill set, obviously even draws you more into it, once you get the full picture on it. So, the endorsement that Brandon gave him was, huge, in the evaluation process to get someone that's been, behind closed doors with him and really worked with him, day to day.
So Brandon Staley worked with Leonard Floyd twice, and the 49ers are obviously familiar with Leonard Floyd. I mean, he was a really good edge rusher for the Rams, and that was obviously within the division. But I think it was Staley's endorsement that really signed, sealed, and delivered everything. Another interesting connection is Isaac Yiadom, the cornerback who put up such a good season for the Saints last year. He's going to have a chance to start for the 49ers at one of the cornerback positions. At the very least, is going to be really good depth. I mentioned after watching practice the other day that this looks like the deepest cornerback room that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have had in their time with the 49ers. Brandon Staley actually coached Isaac Yiadom in 2018 and 2019 in Denver. That was back when Staley worked primarily with outside linebackers. But Yiadom was there, and I asked him about it, and he said he's so proud of him because he's not the player now that he was in 2019. He is morphed into, he dedicated himself into being a really good corner, and he was a really good corner last year. Paulson Adebo, the Stanford product, went down with an injury for the Saints last year. That gave Isaac Yiadom his chance. And he was physical. He broke up a lot of passes. He was amongst the league leaders in pass breakups, despite starting for only half the season. And he's on the 49ers now. They're able to lock him down in free agency. So the Staley connection, and Staley got hired, and the 49ers, I think, immediately had him sit in on some of these personnel meetings. The Staley connection runs through two free agents, through Isaac Yiadom and obviously through Leonard Floyd. And, some of the Isaac Yiadom tape last year has got to be so intriguing to the 49ers. I know they're looking for strong press man corners. We saw it with Renardo Green, who successfully played that technique in college. I think Renardo is going to have to spend a little bit of time strengthening it up at the NFL level. But somebody like Isaac Yiadom, he's already been through the fire. He's already developed into a bona fide NFL player. He should be strong enough from day one to execute some of the techniques that the 49ers need to execute. Speaking of strength, Shaquille Brown, defensive lineman, probably a defensive tackle, tried out for the 49ers at the rookie minicamp a couple weeks ago, and they signed him to the 90-man roster. So what about Shaquille Brown impressed Chris Kasarik so much in that tryout?
Shaquille Brown show you in his tryout to earn a spot on that 90-man roster?
Just checked all the boxes that we needed checked off. You know, he got hurt last year in Tennessee, and he was a guy that we coveted. You know, we had a draftable type grade on him, and then we really tried to pursue him as an undrafted free agent the previous year and lost out to Tennessee. And then he tore his Achilles in the preseason. Just coming in here, first we wanted to see what type of football shape he was during the rookie minicamp. I think he's 8 months off the injury, so just kind of wanted to see where he was, from a conditioning standpoint, and then just, once that box was checked, just, see how he's moving on it, and he checked all the boxes during, the short period of time that we were able to work with him during that rookie mini camp. Moved good, wasn't favoring it or anything. You can tell that he kind of had put it totally past him. So, and just another guy with the size inside, very thick lower body, very explosive lower body. One of the reasons, we wanted him coming out of Troy the year before. So excited to get him here. He's been here, a couple weeks now, and just continue to progress within the scheme and get him into training camp and put some pads on and really see that size and explosion really come to life.
Size and explosion, that's a combination the 49ers talked about a lot when DJ Jones wore their uniform, and that's the last time that they had a truly overpowering run defense. So you could see why they liked Shaquille Brown as an undrafted free agent last year. And then they missed out on him, went to Tennessee instead. He got hurt there. But they've needed that beef, that explosive beef inside ever since DJ Jones left in free agency for $10 million a year to the Denver Broncos. Another player who is intriguing in that regard, as the 49ers try to fix a run defense that was ranked down at number 26 last year, is Evan Anderson, defensive tackle out of Florida Atlantic. They gave him a $280,000 guarantee as an undrafted free agent. He is the biggest 49ers defensive lineman weight-wise, I think, in this entire Shanahan Lynch era, 326 pounds. I think weighs even more than DJ Jones did. So Evan Anderson, that's the guy that did the big cannonball into his pool after the 49ers signed him to that $280,000 guaranteed as a UDFA. We'll see if he can progress, develop his technique as a pass rusher as well, so he's not a liability in that regard. But big body in the middle, athletic enough to man the wide nine defense. I think that's one of the weaknesses the 49ers need. They need to address that It's been a weakness ever since DJ Jones left. Eric Armstead was able to anchor that run defense for a while. Then he started getting hurt a lot. So there's a void against the run in the middle right now. Somebody like Kalia Davis, who's drawn direct comparisons to DJ Jones and the 49ers, it's important that he potentially steps up. You look at Shaquille Brown, who we just talked about, and you look at Evan Anderson on the inside. But I want to go back to Brandon Staley, because anytime that the 49ers bring in a new coach that isn't necessarily rooted in their ways and their system, I think back to the example of Mike Shanahan joining the 49ers in 1992, coming from an entirely different way of doing things. And Kyle Shanahan talks about that as well. In fact, when the 49ers hired Steve Wilkes last offseason, he was coming from a different system. And Kyle remembered what happened with Mike when he joined the 49ers in 92. George Seifert, the head coach at the time, said, hey, we need you to just lock yourself in a room, learn our way of doing things before you integrate your way of doing things, and then let's come up with a really good hybrid. Obviously, with Steve Wilkes, it didn't work last year for the 49ers. My suspicion is that they tried to bite off too much to chew immediately by making Wilkes the defensive play caller. I think they're tempering their approach this year. They're recognizing the need to evolve with Brandon Staley, but they didn't give him a play caller role. Instead, they gave him this assistant head coach role, and the coach who's already familiar with the system coming from Seattle, Nick Sorensen, is the one who's the defensive coordinator. Anyway, the dynamic, though, is similar in that the 49ers are bringing in an outside mind and an outside voice and trying to integrate that outside mind and outside voice with their existing structure. So it reminded me of the whole Mike Shanahan integration, which went so well in 1992. I asked Brandon Staley about this because I was very, very curious to know if Kyle Shanahan talked about the Mike Shanahan example from 92. And it turns out that the Mike Shanahan connection runs even deeper than that for Brandon Staley.
Talked about bringing in an outside coach, maybe with some different philosophies and melding it in. He's gone back to the example of his dad, Mike, coming over in 92. And back then, I guess George Seifert challenged him to just sit down and study everything that the 49ers did. Did Kyle present a similar challenge to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the things that, you're excited about, is to join up with a new group of guys that you really respect, offensively, defensively, and in the kicking game, and prove yourself. And then, where it fits, experiences that you've had in the past, things that make sense, then, you can apply some things too. And, Mike has been really good to me over the years, Kyle's dad, been a great resource for me, a guy that I have the utmost respect for, a guy that, I think is one of the top coaches to ever coach. And I'm fortunate, that he's, reached out to me and been a resource for me. And now that I'm here, that can take place even more. And so very grateful for that. And, like you said, you're always trying to improve, as a competitor, as a coach. And, I think coming here allows us all to do that.
So Brandon Staley talking about his connection with Mike Shanahan, which apparently runs deeper than just the past few weeks, the past couple of months since he's joined the 49ers. It goes back further. And who knows, when you ask a question like I did there, sometimes you run into a gold mine of new information. Brandon Staley and Mike Shanahan had already been in contact for a while before Brandon Staley even took this job with the 49ers. So 49ers coaches intel. Deep intel. As you can tell, we were able to glean a lot of information about how this 49ers team is shaping up, what it's going to look like. We'll be on the practice field again a week from now on Wednesday. And I think, now with the knowledge that we got today, it's going to be interesting to look for certain wrinkles, look for certain things that the 49ers are working on. It obviously is going to intensify in 2 months. I think exactly 2 months from now, around July 22nd, July 23rd is when training camp typically starts. That's when it's going to be more serious, more 11-on-11 work. Everybody should be in the building. The 49ers would hope, at least. We'll see with Brandon Ayuk and somebody like Jawan Jennings, neither of whom are present right now. But by then, the vision will be constructed, or at least the construction on the vision will be happening in earnest. Right now in OTAs, this is more about the young players. This is more about acclimating the rookies, even acclimating the coaches. As I didn't show anything from Mick Lombardi there, but he's a new coach, former OC of the Raiders. He's a senior offensive assistant for the 49ers. Clay Kubiak also spoke today. He's gotten a little bit of a promotion from the assistant quarterbacks coach up to the pass game specialist. That's his brother's old role, Clint Kubiak, who's now the offensive coordinator of the Saints. So the 49ers are trying to make all these changes holistically. They're trying to make sure that this machine keeps on humming along. They've obviously drawn a lot of interest from other teams over the course of all these years. Winning teams produce coaches for other teams, and that obviously has been the case for the 49ers, but they're trying to keep this thing humming. I think when you look at the big picture, it was the number one offense by a mile in football last year, but the defense slid to number 12, and the run defense especially was problematic, sliding to number 26 for the 49ers. So a lot of the changes they made, they fired the defensive coordinator, Steve Wilks. They hired Nick Sorensen from within. They brought in Brandon Staley from the outside. Staley also talked about Fred Warner, making sure that he's used properly. A lot of the changes the 49ers made were aimed at addressing the issues that we saw last season. I'm going to open this up to a 49ers Q&A. So let me get this up on the screen for you guys, and we'll answer some of your questions before I head out to dinner. But hopefully you enjoyed this extended version of 49ers Intel. I honestly don't think that you get Intel this deep anywhere, especially on YouTube, with the clips of the coaches, discussion of the 49ers history, the talk about the strategy. I mean, this is probably the only unbiased channel for 49ers news based on what I've been watching and what I've been told is happening elsewhere in the 49ers content creator universe. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and we'll continue breaking it down in an objective and unbiased way, as is only possible right here. I'm ready for your questions, and we'll move forward with that. Somebody's asking if I'm joining the Navy based on the stripes. No, but I think I earned my stripes, pun intended there, when I swam the Golden Gate on Sunday or Saturday. Was it Saturday or Sunday? I don't know. I got seasick when I swam the Golden Gate. Well, we're going to have some videos of that swim for you at some point. I just, when I look at them, I get seasick again. They call that area of the Golden Gate the washing machine because of the way that the water's churning about on all sorts of different angles. And there were times during that swim where I was like, yeah, I'm not going to survive this, just because it's just getting tossed around. But I fought through. I made it. I'm alive. And I don't think that I'm joining the Navy, but I did earn my stripes. Eric Gomes, all caps, ask some good questions. Yes. Why don't we ask some good questions? I would appreciate that. Do I think that this is the most talent the 49ers have had with players and coaches? This does look like it could be the best roster they've had. I never know with the rookies. You got to give me at least training camp, but preferably give me a few games. The weakness last year was on the interior defensive line, the run defense. Obviously, coaching-wise, it wasn't a fit with Steve Wilks. So they've got to get better there, and I think that they've given themselves a chance to get better there, but there's still too many questions. And I do think that they've made the offensive line better with the addition of Dominic Pooney, Jared Kingston. We'll see what some of the undrafted free agents can do. So the interior offensive line can be better. The interior defensive line can be better. We will see if they will be better. If they are, boom, the 49ers are ready to go because they've added a skill position weapon, at least one, in Ricky Pearsall, probably Jacob Cowing as well. Trent Taylor's back. So, at the skill positions, they are better. The running back position, Guerrero is now in the house. I know a lot of people like Cody Schrader. They are better there, but I always look at the trenches. And if they can be better along the interior offensive line and the interior defensive line, as they've striven to be, then yes, I think this team has taken it to another level. But we just have to wait and see until training camp and the season starts. And this is exactly, I mean, there's a question right here talking about the right side of the O-line being problematic and pressure up the middle. Did the 49ers do enough to fix this? I think that the 49ers did what they could to fix some of the interior pressure, given that the draft capital that they had. There was no tackle who's going to be a surefire improvement over what the 49ers had at the spot that they were picking. So they decided to focus on the interior, which makes sense from a draft analysis standpoint. But again, we could only speculate right now because Dominic Pooney hasn't put on a game day uniform yet. Do I have a vibe on how the 49ers defensive coaching is coming together? Well, I mean, Nick Sorensen is the defensive coordinator. Brandon Staley is going to be, I think the way I read it is a whiteboard guy who's all over the place. He's going to be helping mainly with the defensive backs, but he's going to be helping a lot in game planning. And he can bring a lot of the chess match experience because he's been a defensive coordinator before. He's been a head coach before. He can bring some of the big picture chess match experience to help Nick Sorensen, who has the experience within the 49ers structural scheme, right? They want to modify and advance the scheme while also sticking true to its roots. And that's what Nick Sorensen can specialize at. Waiting for some more questions. Will Danny Gray make the team? It's a deep receiver room. It's a really, really, really deep receiver room. So it's going to be tough. I think he faces an uphill battle at this point. And I don't know how things are going to shake out injury-wise. I don't know if Danny Gray is going to have an extra step to him this year with that potentially added motivation. So it's hard to tell you for sure if he's going to make the team or not. But right now, I would put him, and I have him, I think, on my 90-man roster when I project the 53-man. I have him on the outside looking in. So I think it's going to be an uphill battle for somebody like Danny Gray. Mike thinks that Tay Martin has a better chance. Tay Martin was making a lot of catches in the 7-on-7 stuff the other day. And you can't only look at it in terms of the 53-man roster. You have to look at it in terms of the practice squad. I kind of have a spot earmarked for Trent Taylor, for example, on the practice squad, because the 49ers, it's almost an extended version of the roster at this point, because you can call players up and temporarily for games, and some of them are going to have specialized roles. I know Tay Martin was a practice squad guy for the 49ers last year, so it wouldn't surprise me if they use that designation again for somebody like him and for somebody like Trent Taylor. The swim was extremely difficult. It would drown most people. The Golden Gate has only been, this is what I was told. 4,500 people have climbed Mount Everest, but I think that fewer than 200 people have swum that Point Bonita Golden Gate route. I mean, it's really tough. It's really cold. It's a washing machine. You're like thrown into a washing machine. And on top of that, that's when the conditions are fine. Like when the conditions are fine, there's difficulty with some of the chop and some of the water. The conditions were not fine on Saturday morning. What about Tariq Owens? He's wearing number 84, and he's not wearing his dad's 81. He's out there wearing number 84. I mean, I don't know what you want me to say at this point. We haven't really gotten to any level of competition yet on the field. That's going to be determined in training camp. We need to see a little bit more of the 11-on-11 before we start making firm judgments on these players. Are they going to let Brock Purdy call it the pass pro in some situations this year? I don't know. Shanahan's system has always been very center dependent. And now Jake Brendel, I guess it's knee tendonitis. I think Kyle Shanahan might have misspoken with the knee arthritis that was going on out there. But that was clarified today. Knee tendonitis for Brendel, which I think is not as alarming as knee arthritis. But he's still probably going to miss all of OTA. So that's the starting center out. That means that John Feliciano, a veteran who started at center before, is going to be manning that position for the time being. Anyway, some turnover at center, at least here for the offseason program. That's the position that diagnoses the fronts and calls out the protections in this system. That's why Alex Mack has been an ally or was an ally before he retired of Kyle Shanahan's with 3 different teams. Would Brock Purdy handling some of that help the 49ers, hurt the 49ers? We can sit back and discuss. I don't have enough details, I think, to give a fully educated opinion on that or a prediction of what's going to happen. But it certainly would be interesting if Brock Purdy took on a little bit of added responsibility. I think swimming Alcatraz wearing my number 17 jersey would completely ruin the jersey, unfortunately. However, I can swim Alcatraz, get out, and put on the jersey if you guys want me to, if the 49ers win the Super Bowl. And I would have to swim in like February if they won the Super Bowl. Fine. We'll add this to if the 49ers win the Super Bowl, I will reveal the number 17 jersey, and I'll also swim from Alcatraz in without a wetsuit in February. I'm increasing the stakes of the wager. So we reveal the jersey, the back of it, and I swim from Alcatraz to San Francisco, potentially on the morning of the 49ers parade. But I don't know if that's going to be possible. So let's not guarantee that. But potentially on the morning of the 49ers parade, we will swim from Alcatraz without a wetsuit. And we can live stream it. Yes, it will be live streamed. The Alcatraz to San Francisco swim without a wetsuit. That's going to be tough, but I'll get ready for it. That's going to be happening in February if the 49ers win the Super Bowl. What's my belief in defensive coordinators on the booth versus in the field? I think that the 49ers really, really like their coordinators on the field just because there's a certain violence and intensity that they like to play with, and they want the coaching staff to communicate that to the players. They've already decided that, and Nick Sorensen's already decided he's going to be down on the field. So it's not going to be a question. I don't know where Staley's going to be, but Staley, back when he was a defensive coordinator with the Rams, was on the field. Then he was a head coach for the Chargers. So he's obviously on the field during that time as well. So people hoping that I'll be swimming in February. Yes, I can see how 49ers fans would want that since it's tied to a potential Super Bowl win for the 49ers. All right, I'm thinking about stretching this to 49 minutes, but I'm also thinking about not because I have places to be. So how about not? Thank you to everybody. It's been fun. We have a new promise here. If the 49ers can win a Super Bowl, we'll see. Everybody, hope you enjoyed 49ers Intel. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Do all that stuff. Maybe the like button too. We'll talk to you all very soon.